We have a really fantastic webinar today. My name is Caitlin Karolenko. I'm Scientific Program Manager at the Institute for the Advancement of Food and Nutrition Sciences, or IFANS for short. It's going to be my pleasure to moderate today's webinar, Science versus the Scroll, Rebuilding Public Confidence in Food and Nutrition Science. For those of you who might not be as familiar with IFANS, we are a nonprofit organization focused on advancing food and nutrition science for public benefit. This is done by bringing together scientists from government, industry, and academia to identify areas of common interest and develop projects to address science in those areas. As an organization, IFANS funds research. We convene experts to deliver a variety of products, including competitively funded research, workshops, dialogues, and peer-reviewed publications, just as some examples. Today's webinar is sponsored by the IFANS Assembly on Scientific Integrity. This is a group that works to support projects to help IFANS achieve the highest levels of scientific integrity while also promoting others to uphold those same standards. The Assembly is made up of people from all areas of our membership, including our IFANS Board of Trustees, the Scientific Leadership Council, and IFANS members from government, industry, and academia. And you can certainly visit the IFANS website to learn more about our projects and ongoing initiatives that fall under that Assembly on Scientific Integrity's umbrella. All right, quick logistical note before we go ahead and get started. If you want to ask a question, you need to click on or submit a comment, either one. You can click on the Q&A tab at the bottom of your panel and go ahead and enter your question in the box. I will note the chat has been disabled, so the only place to enter your questions or comments is in that Q&A box. The questions are only visible to IFANS staff, and we will be able to address those questions as we have time at the end of the webinar. All right, so without further ado, we have two wonderful speakers joining us today. We have Priscilla Leftakis and Veronica Jaramillo. They're food scientists, science communicators, and co-founders of the Food Truth Project, whose mission is to demystify food, nutrition, and wellness information using science and critical thinking. Super important topic at this time. I'll let them tell you more about their story. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Veronica and Priscilla.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so hello everyone, welcome. This is the Science versus the Scroll, Rebuilding Public Confidence and Food and Nutrition Science, presented by the Food Truth Project.
So with everything that's going on right now, we wanted to take a moment to tell everybody that we are Canadian science communicators. We're very proud to be here today. We're happy to continue the long-standing partnership between the US and Canada and everything that we do together, whether it's science, whether it's trade. And we put this message because science communication has no borders and misinformation has no borders as well. This involves everybody.
So before we get into the real bulk of the workshop, we wanted to give a brief introduction about ourselves. Caitlin already started by giving a little bit, but we just like to add a bit more so you get to know us as we present. So my name is Veronica Jaramillo. I am a food scientist. In terms of education, I have a bachelor's degree in food science and agricultural chemistry from McGill University here in Montreal, Quebec. And right now I'm completing my master's degree in food safety also here at McGill. In terms of experience, of course, I'm the co-founder with my lovely partner, Priscilla Leftakis. We met while we were students doing our undergrad at McGill University. And I'm also a student intern working with the Operations and Emergency Communications team at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. And when I'm not doing any of that, I also do freelance research for the Unbiased Science podcast and platform. I do most of their food science content. And when I'm not doing any of that, I'm also a teaching assistant here at McGill doing food science undergraduate classes, and I'm also a private piano teacher. And we also like to humanize ourselves a little bit so you get to know us. So we have a couple fun facts before we get into the bulk of the presentation because it can be kind of a heavy topic. So a fun fact about me is that I'm actually a party princess. So I have this job where I dress up as various Disney characters and Disney princesses, and I go and I entertain, sing, and basically entertain children's parties and corporate events. It's a very fun time. So here's a couple pictures of me. There's one of Cinderella, Ariel, Anna from Frozen. It's very unrelated to food science, but still a fun fact. And another fun fact about me is that I renovated a school bus. So a couple years ago, I bought a yellow school bus that was not used for school bus driving purposes anymore. And I decided to gut it from the inside out and make a tiny home on wheels. So I ended up traveling all over Canada with my little bus and rented it to a lot of other Canadians and even Americans sometimes so that they could live out the tiny house and the school bus trip of their dreams. So those are two fun facts about me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Priscilla Liftakis. I'm also a food scientist. In terms of my education, I have a pre-university program in health sciences that I did here in Montreal. I also got my bachelor's in food science and agricultural chemistry from McGill University in Montreal, Quebec. And of course, I'm the co-founder of the Food Truth Project. In addition to that, I have over 10 years of experience in customer service sales in the food industry. So I started, my first job was at McDonald's, and ever since then, I've just been fascinated about how food is processed, etc., and what people are looking for in their food. And over 3 years of experience in quality assurance, quality control, R&D in different food processing companies. And I recently accepted a role as a research project officer at the RITA Consortium. So we're based in McGill University in Montreal, and it's a research hub to kind of build a bridge between industry and research. And fun fact about me is some fun facts is I built a product-based business when I was 18 to get through school, which it did get me through school. I had Bath and Body Care, and I did a lot of different markets, and I went across Canada to different stores to pitch my products. And I was able to pay my university degree with that. So I'm very grateful to have been an entrepreneur at such a young age. I also love traveling, and I say this because I specifically love traveling to two places in the world. I love going to Italy and Greece. So my most recent trip in Italy, I had the chance to hand make pasta with a nonna in this small village, and that was one of the kind of most amazing experiences of my life. And so I always like sharing that. I love going around the world and trying new foods. And my favorite quote is, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." And you might see some quotes in this presentation. I'm just saying, I love quotes. Just putting it out there. So, what is the Food Truth Project? There's two sides to it. First off, we have educational workshops that are designed to identify and debunk misinformation that's going on online surrounding food, nutrition, agriculture, and wellness. So these are workshops that we give usually in person or through webinars to high schools, CEGEPs, colleges, universities, and to businesses and conferences. And we also have the other side, which is we have an online platform that's aimed to discuss popular topics in food, nutrition, and wellness. And that's where we have a lot of our viewership, a lot of really popular videos that we debunk different types of claims. And we also have posts increasing food and media science literacy for all. And we often get asked why we built the Food Truth Project. And I think it's really important to understand that while we were in our degree in food science and what we were learning in school, we also are very much on social media. And me and Veronica would share that we would often come across videos that would go fear-mongering surrounding different oils, different ingredients, different companies, so on and so forth. And we really saw that this had an effect in people's diet and people's lives and really affected their relationship with food. So we decided to do something about this. And in early 2023, we were able to get a grant from McGill University. So everything happened really quickly. First off, we created the Food Truth Project with the small grant from our university to really start off the workshops. And that quickly accelerated to giving workshops in high schools, universities, and then going to different places in Canada. So over 30 classrooms, reached over 3,000 students in person and online. And fast forward to now, we're doing a lot of industry workshops. We're speaking at global conferences. We've been to Calgary, Ottawa, Washington, North Carolina. We recently came back from a foreign tour in Saskatoon, which was very fun. And Veronica just came back from Chicago from doing a podcast at IFT. So it's growing really quickly and beyond our dreams right here.
So in terms of our webinar today, we have 3 goals for everybody. First is to understand the online food and nutrition misinformation crisis. We want to understand really what's happening, what are people absorbing on their phones, and how is that impacting their relationship with food and the scientific community. Then we're going to explore why exactly people distrust science and the food industry. We're going to present 3 main reasons what's causing that distrust. And then finally, we're going to learn how to rebuild that public trust and elevate science through community engagement and digital communication. Before we really start with the bulk of the workshop, I wanted to present a statistic kind of just to set the tone. So this is actually a survey done from the International Food Information Council. This was their 2024 survey. And essentially, this one says that less than 4 in 10 Americans strongly trust science about food, nutrition, and or diet. So more than, or at least 60% of people have some level of distrust when it comes to the science regarding their food and nutrition and their diet. So we really wanted to understand why. And through our experience as science communicators, food scientists, and our research throughout these years that we've had the Food Truth Project, we've discovered that there's really three main reasons that's causing the decline in public trust towards food and nutrition science. And the first one is called the infodemic. And before we get really into explaining the infodemic, we'd prefer just to show you. So please listen up. We have a short little video clip for you guys to see. Okay, so as you've seen, there's a lot of content. That was just a little bit of a glimpse into people who are interested in food and nutrition. If they go on social media, that's some of the content that you'd be exposed to. So we have a question for everyone, assuming everyone here is on social media or has been on social media before. Has anyone here ever seen topics like these in their social media feed? So this is some that Priscilla and I have personally seen on our social media. We've seen ones like seed oils, detoxing, a lot of fake versus real food. We've seen a lot about diets and GLP-1s, foods for weight loss. So just think to yourself if you've ever seen at least one of these topics or multiple topics on your social media before. And I'm pretty sure the answer would be yes, because food and nutrition information is everywhere. So as I said, the very first reason why people are losing trust in food and nutrition science is because of the infodemic. So there's an infodemic of food, nutrition, and wellness information online. So this exactly means what an infodemic is. It's a rapid and far-reaching spread of both accurate and inaccurate information about certain issues. So of course, as we know with the media landscape of social media, anyone can post anything at any time. And with food and nutrition being very popular topics, we're getting a lot of information about it. And unfortunately, the result is that there is widespread online misinformation about food and nutrition. And we wanted to understand why exactly social media platforms really supercharge food misinformation. There is a lot of it, but for some reason, people are more exposed to the misinformative information than the accurate misinformation. And first, it's important to acknowledge that food and nutrition information is mostly outsourced on social media. This is true for almost everybody, but especially for young people, that we get most of our information, if not all of our information, from our phones and from social media. And this also begs the question, what decides or who is deciding what information the social media platform is going to be giving us first? And the answer is called the algorithm. So maybe some people have heard of this before, but the algorithm is essentially how these social media apps filter out what content is going to give you first. And of course, social media apps are designed to keep you on the platform as long as possible. That's their main goal, right? So the algorithm tracks your information. They track your engagement. So they're going to see how much time you spend on what kind of videos, what kind of topics you like, and they're going to filter and create a special feed just for you so that you'll be able to stay on the app as long as possible. They also take information like how old you are, what you like, your gender, your location, all of this to try and create the perfect feed for you to try and be as most engaged as possible and to stay on the app. And they do this because attention is the currency of social media platforms. As we know, social media is free. So the reason why social media platforms want to keep you there as long as possible is to expose you to ads. So of course, the more people are there, the more money they get. Content, and they figured out that the algorithm and social media companies have figured out that the content that evokes very strong emotion, like anxiety, fear, disgust, and very oversimplified and not nuanced information gets the most attention. So this is something like an influencer being like, did you know seed oils are going to kill you? Or did you know that Red 40 gives you cancer? Like very fear-mongering, very anxiety-inducing information. That's what people are attracted to the most, and that's what gets the most attention, and that's what's boosted in the algorithm. So if the algorithm senses that people really like this kind of content, it's going to send it to more people, and it's going to get more attention and more engagement. And food and nutrition are really a perfect storm for misinformation on social media because there is so many different opinions about food, about nutrition, about wellness. And this is also combined with the fact that food is a very personal, emotional, and cultural thing to a lot of people. So of course, they're going to be interested in it. And we like to use the term misinfluencers when there's influencer spreading clearly misinformative information. They know this. So they know how to work the algorithm, they know how to get a large following, and they use this to their advantage. And the hard part about this is that these misinfluencers who get a lot of attention, they get millions of followers, this gives them the illusion of credibility. So popularity can often look like expertise, and this fuels the trust in both the person and the social media platform. And they use this to their advantage. So we're often going to see misinfluencers promoting their product or their supplement or their course as they've gotten all of this attention. So just to sum up, the infodemic contributes to mistrust in both food and nutrition science in two main ways. The first is that there's just too much information out there. A lot of it is low quality and inaccurate, and we're not able to sift through it, and the algorithm really isn't helping. And another one is that we're not a part of the conversation. The scientists, the science communicators, were not as prominent in these apps as misinfluencers are. So non-scientific, unreliable sources, they dominate the media landscape. And credible science like us, who gives things that are maybe less sexy, not as nuanced, were unfortunately unfavored by the algorithm, and we're not reaching people where they are. So that was the first main reason that we found through our research, the infodemic that causes the public trust towards food and nutrition science. Now I'm going to pass it off to Priscilla to talk about the second main reason why people are losing trust.
So thank you, Veronica, for that. So now that we've spoken about the infodemic and that there's a lot of information online, you can imagine that there's a lot of information surrounding the food industry. So let's talk about the food industry distrust, the mistrust towards big food companies, okay? So I wanted to start with two videos, and so listen carefully to these two videos and the claims behind them. So the rhetoric and claims that you might have heard revolve around the fact that food is made in factories by labs and scientists, but this is used in a negative way, right? Population is being drugged and poisoned by the food system. There's unregulated chemicals, big food, right? That term that we hear often. And food companies are putting profit over consumer. So remember when Veronica said that there's an infodemic of both accurate and inaccurate information? This is a really great example, right? So I wanted to start with the idea of what is big food, because some people don't know what this definition means and it's often used online. So big food refers to the select few food companies that own the majority of global food systems. So this can be seen as market control. There's a decentralization from local foods. There's powerful corporations that have influence over policy and regulation. And this term is often used on social media in fear-mongering campaigns and scary headlines, which works very well, right? And the term was coined by Neil D. Hamilton back in 2004. So this term has been in use for over 20 years, but we see it often on social media. And what comes up often on videos, social media posts, articles, so on and so forth, is this graph. So this is from Oxfam in 2014, which linked different food companies, big food companies, that all their brands that they had, and kind of made the sketch. In 11 years, I'm sure it has changed in multiple different ways. There's way more food brands on the market as well. So, but they still use this. And so I think it's incorrect at this point, but they love to use this graph. It's very powerful imaging. And I want to mention that public mistrust of the food industry and the scientific body that's associated to it did not appear out of thin air. This is not just due to misinformation on social media. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So trust is continuously broken, okay? There are mistakes that are happening in the past, and there's things that are still happening today that consumers are constantly being aware about. So we have a few examples like the Nutri-Score saga in France. The ones I wanted to discuss with you, since we're Canadian science communicators, is the two of them that impact us the most, that I heard most of in the media. So there was a price fixing of bread scandal in Canada where the bread producers, the bread distributors, and the supermarkets all came together in a secret agreement to inflate the price of bread over 20 years. And then they had to pay a fine because they were found to be doing this by the Competition Bureau of Canada. So this fuels mistrust towards big food and this food industry, because they're clearly, consumers are thinking that these companies are putting profit over consumers, and that's a great example. There's also the Canadian food and beverage industry that was influencing policy when we were changing our dietary guidelines in 2016. We were removing milk from being kind of the glass of milk a day to it was suggested to drink water. We removed red meat to then show lean meats and tofu. And so there was a lot of backlash and a lot of campaigns to show how these dietary guidelines weren't based on science, and this is going to inflate the price of certain products. And there was a lot of arguments used, right? Because they want to vouch for their industry, which is understandable. But this showed people that, oh, there's an industry that really doesn't want us to eat healthy, right? That's what the consumer can think. And There's other examples like food recalls that are happening and that are very publicized, often negatively impact consumer trust towards those brands. But I don't want to focus on the ethics of morals of the food industry, okay? I'm not here for that. I want to talk about what makes this issue worse, okay? There's a lack of transparency in the scientific practices on websites, social media, and digital communication. Basically, no one knows how their food is made, and we kind of just expect them to trust that the food that are in groceries is safe. There's minimal investment in science communication. So I don't see any science communication kind of tabs on the industry websites, etc., to learn more about the science that they do and what's the science behind their products, etc. Some of it is, confidential, I understand, but we often don't see any SciComm being done. There's no national or international responses on behalf of corporations towards misinformative campaigns. There are massive campaigns on social media targeting specific ingredients, specific industries, and specific companies with massive claims, whether they are accurate or not. And we don't see a response on this. And that can cause the consumer to believe that, oh, well, that's true because everyone is saying it online and this company is staying silent, which means they're guilty. But often we know that may be accurate or not. But again, staying silent isn't helping in this situation. And finally, there's minimal accountability and responsibility after scandals or mistakes. After the price fixing scandal in Canada, people were very upset by this. People felt conned. Consumers felt upset and didn't know because all the breads were owned by, these 2-3 companies in Canada. So there wasn't any accountability. There was just, oh, I'll pay the fine, so on and so forth. And no discussion with the consumer really to increase that trust. So put yourself in the average consumer's shoes after seeing all of this. And I'm going to show you guys how that links to nutrition and food scientists, okay? And the science that is being done by all of us in nutrition, food scientists, and research. So there's popular digital content discussing big food and the concept that food industry puts profit over people. That leads to a lot of public information on how the food industry funds multiple food and nutrition projects worldwide. This is used against them. This is used against the industry. This is used against the scientists. Because after that, funded scientific studies, research scientists, industry professional, anyone working in food and nutrition, they're called corrupt and biased right away if they're working with industry or it was funded by industry interests. So what I want everyone to take away from this is there's a close link between mistrust in food industry and mistrust in the food and nutrition scientists. Is that an accurate thing to connect them to? And are all scientists corrupt? Absolutely not. But if you put yourself in the consumer's shoes, there's historical mistakes. There's a lack of accountability and responsibility, which causes a broken trust with the consumer. There's minimal efforts in science communication and lack of transparency to address why they do scientific research and what it benefits. And then there's concerns that the industry-funded research places profit before public health. So for the food industry, it's profit before the consumer's health and prices and all that. But then we think that, oh, that research doesn't benefit the consumer, it benefits the industry. So we really have to have a conversation about how we can change that narrative.
Thank you, Priscilla. So those were our first initial 2 main reasons why there's a decline in public trust towards food nutrition. We spoke about the infodemic, and Priscilla spoke about food industry distrust. And now finally, I want to speak about the third one, which is a fundamental misunderstanding of the scientific process and how science works. And we have 2 more videos for you. Okay, so I picked those 2 videos because it was basically a representation of what I'm seeing online in terms of the narrative behind science and science behind nutrition. It was just a good glimpse into what I'm seeing online. And this can be a little bit difficult for someone who's in academia and as food scientists to understand, and just any scientist in general, because we know, at least we think we know what science is, right? Science is the best tool we have for understanding the world around us. It's a way to understand everything, right? And we do this with evidence and observation, and it's always evolving with new data and new technology. There is changes in scientific consensus in food, nutrition, and other areas, and this is normal because we have new data, we have new technology, we get new evidence. It's a very transparent and peer-reviewed process. We don't do this alone, we do this within the community, and it's built on constantly asking questions and being skeptical, right? And this can be kind of contrary to what the public can see what science is, because science can seem like a set of unchanging facts, very rigid, based on people's beliefs and opinions, and it could be a tool for confirming bias. And the most common one that I'm seeing online is that science can be unreliable or is unreliable if the consensus changes. And we're seeing this because we know that people value consistency, and science is often seen as a very steady, unbiased voice of reason. So when scientific guidance changes, especially in policy that's rooted in science, when that changes, it can create a sense of instability for the average person. And this can feel like a real breach of trust. We followed a set of rules that was evidence-based, and now that's suddenly changing. Why should I trust you? And it actually stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of what science and the scientific process is. There's a thought that science is supposed to stay the same, and when in reality, it evolves as new evidence emerges. And there could be this thought process that scientific consensus changing equals incompetence. So why should I listen to you if you're constantly changing the rules? That doesn't make sense, right? And this is especially difficult in the food and nutrition space because scientific consensus can change a lot. In the past couple of years, we've seen policy change and our data change on trans fats. So we know that we shouldn't have trans fats in our food supply anymore. There's also been different consensus on safe levels of alcohol. We used to see marketing that 1 glass a week is actually beneficial for you. And now we know that there is no safe level for alcohol. There's also been different consensus on processed red meats, brominated vegetable oils. There's been additives that have been in our food supply and that have been taken out when new evidence comes to light. And people can feel really uneasy from that. But I'm not going to put the blame only on the public for not understanding science. Not everyone is a scientist or has a high level of scientific literacy, and that's okay. Having an education and being a scientist is a privilege on its own. Just like I expect a scientist to do science, I'm expecting a mechanic to fix my car. I'm not expecting vice versa. Not everyone can be subject matter experts in everything, and that's completely fine. That's normal. But we also have to look inward a bit, and we have to realize and recognize that the problem also rests in the fact that science is historically not very accessible. And what I mean by that is scientific information is not often communicated very clearly. We can see this trope a lot in movies, media, TV, that science and STEM and math are really difficult and everyone hates them. And that often stems from the fact that it's not taught or it's not communicated very clearly. It can seem very overly technical, confusing, and it's not simplified for a general audience. And we have to look inward again because scientists are rarely trained to communicate with the public. I've done a 3-year-long DEC, I've done a 3-year-long bachelor's, and I'm doing a 2-year-long master's, and I've never not once had a course or emphasis on science communication with the public. And within my community, I'm not seeing much of an emphasis on that as well. Slowly, we're seeing things change, but historically, we know that scientists are not trained to communicate with the public. We only know how to speak to other scientists. And of course, we know this if you've ever been in a room with a group of scientists, we can be kind of awkward sometimes and unrelatable and unfortunately even egotistical. We can have this impression sometimes that we know everything, and that doesn't come across well to the general public. This can all make people feel really far away from science, like we're not a part of that conversation, we don't belong there. And then people trust, of course, what they understand. So without the understanding, that trust gets lost in translation. So academia and scientists are unfortunately contributing, whether knowingly or not, to the lack of understanding in food and nutrition science and public trust in food and nutrition science, because it's very complex and we're not good at communicating it clearly. There's also a fundamental misunderstanding that scientific consensus changing equals incompetence on the scientist's end. And of course, unfortunately, we're not taught how to communicate with the public, and that has had grave consequences. And while we wrap up this section, I wanted to finish it off with the same survey that we've seen before. This is also from the International Food Information Council. And this is among the potential sources of food information, the most trusted sources are actually food and nutrition scientists, which is great, right? So when people get their information one-on-one, the most trusted source is actually food and nutrition scientists. So that's us. That's really, really great. And we can see it going down the line. The next is medical doctors, registered dietitians. This is amazing. And you can see at the very, 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 very end, social media influencers are at the very bottom of this. So this is good, right? So the good news is that food and nutrition scientists are still the most trusted demographic. Yay, go us. But then the bad news is being the most trusted source doesn't really matter if we're not the ones creating the content and the information that people actually see. We are not dominating the media landscape, that is for sure. And the conversations that are influencing public opinion and policy, they're happening without us. They're happening with these misinfluencers promoting misinformation just to fuel their own popularity and sell their supplement. And the information filling that space in food and nutrition and how people create their decision-making skills it's not coming from us. We're not meeting people where they are.
So now that we've discussed a few reasons why this created a mistrust towards food and nutrition scientists, this is the part that I think everyone should really listen to as well, is how we can rebuild public trust together. And I put the word together here because it's not just going to be scientists in charge of this. It's not just going to be industry that needs more SciComm, and it's not going to be academia to just give different classes on science communication to their graduates, right? So let's dive into that. Before we start, I want everybody to think about, where does consumer and public trust come from? Take a moment to think about this and what actually creates trust towards whether it's experts or whether it's just an individual person. And think of somebody who you trust and why you trust them, right? So I want to dive into that before we start talking about solutions and examples. So mainly, trust is built on a multitude of things, but mainly trust comes from competency and an empathetic approach. So also warmth and empathy and listening. So in other words, focusing on listening and building bridges rather than pushing data in someone's face. Sometimes we like to just say, well, actually, that's not true. This is not true. There's data that shows this. There's a study, there's a consensus, etc. But you're not listening to the person's actual concerns, okay? So I have this really interesting quote that I love to read to people. This is from Matthew Facciani's blog article called How Can We Rebuild Public Trust in Science and Health? Start Small, Think Big, from a few months ago. And I highly suggest to go read his new book. For many, mistrust in medicine doesn't begin with a conspiracy theory. It begins in a clinical setting where they felt dismissed, rushed, or condescended to. Today, people may feel a deeper connection to a wellness influencer on TikTok who listens and responds to their concerns rather than an impersonal bureaucratic institution. And I think that quote speaks very large for itself. So I want to talk about how we can rebuild public trust. You'll see on the left here, we talk about how scientists and individuals can rebuild that trust. And then we have corporations, institutions, and academia. For the purpose of the webinar and also time, I could talk all day, but for also time, I'd like to focus on scientists and individuals and what you guys can do. We're going to talk about community engagement, digital communication, and some general science communication skills. So let's start talking about community engagement. Okay, I created this really interesting kind of scale. So I'm going to talk about 4 ways to engage with your community and rebuild trust in science. Okay, so it really does start with the one-on-one, and I was surprised when I learned about this about a year ago that it does start with the community building. And so let's talk about that. I created a scale called Hell Yeah to my worst fear, okay? And these 4 ways are going to be on the scale because some of them are easier and some of them are a little bit more difficult. So the first example of community engagement is really easy. Speaking at your children's school about your job, or a challenge, try to communicate to 3 family members or friends what you do as a scientist to really practice your science communication. Because I'm sure a lot of people here have family and friends who don't know what they do, and it's really important to make science visible. I would put this on a hell yeah. This is quite simple, easy, straightforward, doable. Let's look at example 2. Hiring or planning scientific activities at your company or for a birthday. So this is, still a hell yeah, it's easy, but you do have to get a few approvals. I planned a scientific activity at my last workplace, just learning basic things like acid and bases and how soaps work. And I worked as a educator for kids in science activities, so teaching them about vaccines and just how soaps work and cooking, etc. So it was very fun and makes it visible and more of that connection, right? Example 3, now we're getting a little bit more difficult on the scale. I put it yellow because it's not that easy, but it's fun and it's scary, okay? Hosting a workshop with a food scientist, nutrition expert, dietitian, or research scientist in your community. So you can get together with another person in your community at a library or at a space. I will tell you that you will be surprised by how many people have questions about the food that they eat. Often they can't access experts, they don't know where to go. And so having that one-on-one with your community is really important, but a little scary and takes a bit more logistical planning, right? And example 4, I put it at the end of the scale called my worst fear, because it's one-on-one conversations with skeptics, okay? This is something that works very well. But it's pretty much a lot of people's worst fear, especially when you don't like public speaking or you don't like being hearing things that may go against everything that you've worked for, right? This takes a lot of practice and patience. So just to talk about the one-on-one with skeptics, there's a new communication approach called the empathetic refutational interviewing. We won't talk about it today. We can talk about it at another point, but we did want to introduce it. It's really about listening, being empathetic, and also providing a tailored refutation and providing facts. So at the end, community engagement helps making science visible, making science human, sorry, showing real world applications and what the benefits of science are, right? It also breaks that barrier of elitism in science where everyone is welcome to ask their questions and meet with a scientist. You know, like Veronica discussed, sometimes science can feel pretty inaccessible. So it really breaks that barrier. And eventually it helps to rebuild trust. There's, you need confidence, you need character, you need empathy, you need transparency as a scientist, and all that together will help rebuild trust. Veronica, can you go ahead with digital comms? Thank you.
For sure. No problem. So that was the first section of how we can rebuild public trust, which is community engagement. Now we're going to move over to the latter half that we can do that maybe is a little bit more accessible to people, which is, of course, digital communications, where most people get their information from. So there's a lot of examples of digital communications that we can do as both scientists and individuals, and here are just a couple. So first one we can do is we can reach out to our communications department to highlight the science behind R&D and innovation departments. It's an amazing initiative. Priscilla's done this at many of her workplaces, and it's fantastic. It just gets everyone involved in the conversation. We can also elevate the science by engaging with already existing science communication platforms. For a lot of people, building your own platform may not be a very realistic or accessible thing to do, but what we can do is support the people that are already in this space, and we have a couple examples later on. We can also join the science communication team or platform as an expert in your field. So I did this with the Unbiased Science platform, which I'll show in a couple slides. And basically, we're a group of individuals, everyone with their each expertise, and we can speak and we can gather together of how we can communicate the science. And we have experts with every level and with every basically field, and it's fantastic. We can also create a monthly newsletter with your upcoming projects or innovation within your own company or institution. There's one at McGill University, and I love reading it. It's just great to understand what everyone's doing. And we also want to speak to all of the PIs, all of the supervisors, all of the professors on this call right now, on this webinar. We want you to encourage your undergraduate and your graduate students to practice digital science communication. So this can be within a course, this could be throughout their thesis. It's just an amazing thing to be able to do, is to get that experience communicating their science and to make it accessible. And like I mentioned, building your own digital platform isn't very realistic for many people, but here are some great ones that we can contribute to in the meantime. So we highly suggest following these. There's so many more. If you're already following, that's fantastic. If you need more recommendations, we have plenty. But a very quick and easy way to elevate the science is to support the people that are already there. So we have, of course, the Unbiased Science Pod. This is run by Dr. Jess Dyer. She's an amazing public health scientist. I'm a part of that team. Highly recommend. We have have Dr. Ids, who is a doctor that specializes in nutrition. We have the Black food scientist, so many amazing creators. And what you can do is you can follow, like, and what the algorithm really responds to, if you're interested, is sharing it and commenting. So that is something that can really boost these people and to include ourselves more in the conversation. And for community engagement, we would obviously like to give the example of us because we are a community engagement within our community here in Montreal. So there's a lot of things that science communication initiatives can do within their community. Here are a couple of examples. So here there's 2 pictures of Priscilla and I giving workshops with schools. This is one that we gave last week at McGill University. And it's just a fantastic way to connect with the community and also speak to young people who are forming their relationships with the media and food and just have a lot of questions about what they eat. We also we run an internship program with undergraduate students at McGill University, and they create a lot of fantastic content for our social media platform. So all of these are posts that are on our social media right now. We also do short form video content that we create for our social media to promote scientific literacy, food literacy, and debunk really common myths. And we manage our online platform, like I mentioned, that has almost 4,000 followers. So all of this can look like, well, all of this is a community, a scientific communication, community engagement platform.
And we could spend hours unpacking the fight against food and nutrition misinformation. We highly suggest to bring the conversation to your audience. So we give different types of workshops. I would say the most popular one is spotting food and nutrition misinformation and rebuilding trust with your consumers. And so these are the 2 workshops that we end up often doing. And if you're ever interested in collaborative opportunities, please reach out to us. You have access to our website and our email that we can respond to. And we also suggest connecting with us on LinkedIn. So we have our Instagram page at Food Truth Project. We also have our LinkedIn, which we post some of our content as well, most of our posts. And then connect with us directly on LinkedIn as well. Please feel free to follow or connect with us. So with Priscilla, you can see our faces here, and Veronica. So we're very active on social media. And we'd like to thank the Institute of Advancing Food and Nutrition Sciences. This kind of is the conclusion of our webinar, and we're really excited to answer questions and hear some of your comments. So in the Q&A chat, you can add your question or comment now, and we will try to go through them. I think Caitlin's gonna share them with us, right? So thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Priscilla. That was really fascinating. I know people are already putting comments and questions in the chat, so I'll go ahead and just address some of these that are already in here as people add more. So I want to start with going back to the beginning of your presentation, talking about the infodemic. There's a question here about, in your best judgment, why do you think there's really no policies around filtering nutrition information and who it come from? Why is there kind of this kind of the Wild West, as one might say?
Yeah, great question. We're Canadian, but we know that this is mostly an American thing of the concept of free speech. So there is conversations right now going on about moderating content that is online. This is especially pertinent with AI generated content that's being put on social media and how it can spread misinformation very, very fast. There's also the conversation of like deep fakes and the whole other ethical conversations that happen around AI. But mainly the rebuttal that we're seeing is that this is an infringement on free speech. So any content moderation is seen as an infringement. Therefore, the solution would just be no content moderation. And there are a couple things I've seen here and there that can help, but I haven't been seeing them as much anymore. When you were scrolling on YouTube Shorts, sometimes when there was a registered dietitian or a registered doctor, it would say on the bottom of the video, like, this information is given by a registered dietitian or a licensed physician in the United States. So that's helpful, right? That adds to credibility, but I'm not seeing that as much anymore, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I think the main reason is because it infringes on free speech.
And I want to add to what Veronica's saying. You remember during the COVID-19 pandemic, we had Meta would have a sort of little either like a pop-up on a post saying some information in this post might be inaccurate or misinformative, etc. They've removed that. I think 2 years ago, a year or two, they removed that. We're not sure exactly why, but I'm sure it also pertains to the amount of information. There's no one that can look at every single video coming out on social media and can say, misinformation or that's good information. And we're seeing misinformative campaigns really affecting everyone's day-to-day life and more in the media and policy. So misinformation is making its way really on big stages right now. So it's very scary, right? It's hard.
I think that leads perfectly into this next question about the algorithm, which I think you guys touched on. And you guys mentioned that it favors the flashy, the jazzy, the really truthful or not, over the factual, unsexy information. So how do we combat that algorithm that favors these more flashy things to get out the actual factual information?
I'd say don't fight it, join it would be my best piece of advice. There are ways of making really interesting, engaging videos that use evidence-based information that are done by credible individuals. And we have a lot of popular science communication or science communicators out there. Dr. Jessica Nurek is a fantastic example. She just reached over 1 million followers. And she's very sassy and she's very to the point and very like, ooh, I want to listen to that. So it's not just about the information, it's how you deliver it. So I think there are certain scientists out there that are doing fantastic work that can deliver information that's interesting to hear. And it is possible. So I don't think there's any way of fighting the algorithm. I think we just have to do our best to be as interesting and engaging as possible.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. Probably if you can't beat them, join them is probably is a good motto for that one. This question came in and we had talked about it in a prep call for this webinar, talking about credentials versus trust. So as scientists, we spend a lot of time, we go to school, we spend a lot of time with our education. And so there is a certain sense of we have these credentials because we earned them and we studied for them. But then this concept you brought up about meeting people where they are. So how do we balance this idea of the credentials and our scientific knowledge with trying to get people to trust us and understand where we're coming from?
I definitely want to answer this and just preface with the fact that there's a lot of misinfluencers or very famous accounts that say doctor something. Okay. So then often people will be like, oh, it's a doctor. I have to listen. And that doctor is telling me to go on a carnivore diet. So looking at credentials and thinking, oh, they're a doctor, etc., is just not enough at this point. And we try to explain that to people when we do workshops. It's like, they're a doctor of what, right? And then we do some deep dive and it's like, they're a chiropractic doctor, right? They're a functional medicine specialist, which is not a physician, which is not a dietitian, right? So we often tell people to really watch out for general credentials that just say, well, I'm a doctor, doctor this, doctor that. Like it's really not actual physicians or actual dietitians. So how do we balance our credentials? Well, with meeting people where they are is making sure to explain to people what are the different credentials out there and which are ones that do have nutrition and food science experts versus some that do not, right? That don't give out diet plans, which they don't give out diet plans. They just give information on, buy my crash course on carnivore diet and look like me, right? So the workshops that we do about red flags includes watch out for people saying that they're an expert, they're a scientist, they have, a PhD, therefore doctor, right? We hear that all the time. So meeting people where they are is just explaining to them that there's different types of credentials. Some are good and some are not related to nutrition and science. So I hope that helps answer the question, and I'm open to discussing that more because I'm telling you now, credentials are not enough because there's a ton of people just saying they're doctors and there's no way to verify it.
Yeah, no, I think that's the point. I think it's something that's going to take time to explain. It's not something, again, with another point we talked about was like, this is not an easy fix. This is going to take time to get there. So I think that's another one of those topics that really gets in there. We have a bunch of questions, so I'm just trying to make sure I get through them all here. When people are wanting to do their own research and they're trying to go to the source and learn about scientific literature, what's your advice to people who don't necessarily understand the scientific process, who don't understand how journal processing works, the nuances that go along with reading journal articles. What is your advice to the general public trying to do their research, trying to go to the source and read these journal articles to really understand the literature? What advice would you give to the general public?
That's a great question. That we were also speaking about that a little bit before, Caitlin, of like, here's a paper in a journal, and then people don't know what to do with that. So it's a difficult process to navigate, especially we speak a lot to young people and they want to get accurate information. So showing people who have not yet finished high school how to read a scientific journal is not very accessible. So in other presentations of how to spot misinformation, we give red flags. And red flags, there's plenty of them, but some of them can be ranging from the cure-all food, they're like, this will do everything. Some is anecdotal evidence saying like, oh, I lost 20 pounds by doing this, so everyone should do it. Another one is that experts rarely use the words best, worst, always, never. There's always some kind of, nuanced information in there. So you're rarely going to see an expert saying that. And I would say there's a lot of great information that you can find online. And when you're seeing someone like pops up and you want to do research on them, you can see what other people are saying about them. And there's a lot of fantastic articles out there with a lot of credible media, basically giving information about who this person is. Have they been known to spread misinformation in the past? A lot of the times we can see that they're like, these people have a track record of 5-10 years of profiting off of misinformation and selling their courses as a solution to the problem they're presenting. So you can definitely find information online with, publications that are done by general media about someone and if they've been known to spread misinformation in the past.
That's great advice. Question about AI, because obviously it's taken over all aspects of our life, or will be potentially one day. Can you guys talk about the role AI is going to play, both maybe as a threat or opportunity for communicating credible nutrition science information?
Yeah, for sure. I just actually gave a talk on this last week in Montreal, and it's very scary. People right now, a lot of young people especially, have very negative opinions towards AI, and we're seeing it everywhere. Like you go on Teams and or you go on Google and there's the AI overview. Like a lot of people, like, we're not asking for the AI version of everything. Like I just want to get the information the way I wanted to get the information. And of course, we're seeing AI taking people's jobs. It was already hard for young people to find jobs, at least in Canada. I'm sure there's similar things happening in the US. And right now, there's a lot of negative connotations towards AI. And I think what we can see in the future, AI can be really useful because it can help filter out some misinformative content. It can guide us well if the programming for that AI is indeed like accurate and well tested. But it's also really concerning because we can see a lot of deep fakes. So there's already a couple, like Dr. Mike is a very popular science communicator. There's been a lot of deep fakes of him promoting a supplement when he didn't actually promote the supplement. So we're probably going to see a little bit more of that in the coming years. And I think right now is the time for some kind of policy for content moderation when it comes to AI. People are screaming at the top of their lungs to get that because, younger people who are absorbing this content who don't know any better are getting influenced by AI content when they're not even knowing it. So now is the time for policy. I don't see it coming in. I hope it comes in, but I think deepfakes are probably in the next couple of years that are going to be really influential and overbearing.
I agree.
Interesting. As our resident Canadians on the call, we have a question about, are you guys seeing any differences between US and Canada in terms of countering food misinformation?
Okay, so this is the very good question. I love these questions. Okay, so the Canadian government, what we're seeing, sort of the actions that they're taking is they invested a few millions of dollars in this, I think 1.2 or 1.4, so I can't be quoted on that, in this initiative called Science Up. So Science Up is it's based out in the West, but it's all over Canada in French and in English. And they counter general healthcare misinformation, food misinformation, and so on and so forth. So this is a way that the government kind of gives money towards science communication platforms. However, one of our goals, me and Veronica on our end in our province, is just as there's, I went to school where we had a lot of, anti-drug, really good sexual health care education, et cetera, and just told us about, the risks of everything and kind of what it looked like. And I think we really believe that our workshops on countering misinformation and just spotting misinformation online, we really want to give that in schools on a provincial, so like on a state level, but as it's province, and we really want to give it on a national level. So that's kind of like our short-term / long-term goal here, is that's where we're headed, because we really think that teenagers should have better tools to spot misinformation and spotting AI. So that's how our government is helping. They are putting money. There are grants for science communication projects, initiatives, and platform through NSERC. So it's a grant process. So it does exist. There is money put into that, but not enough, obviously, as we can imagine. It's
media
never,
landscape- Yeah, the media landscape between the US and Canada is very similar. So misinformation propagates in the US as well as Canada.
Yeah.
We're seeing it more influence policy in the US than it does in Canada. I'd say that's the one big difference. But it spreads just as easily. So there's not that many differences.
yeah.
No, absolutely. Well, guys, we are at the top of the hour. I know we've just barely scratched the surface on this and gotten to the fraction of the questions. I want to thank you guys both for your time today. And go ahead and make sure you follow the Food Truth Project on all of their social medias. And while you're following them, go ahead and follow IFANS at the same time. Thank you guys for your time today.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, everyone, and can't wait to connect with everybody. Have a great day, everybody.